The rescue team saw the horse first. That was the problem. Marcus Chun, the head of the mountain rescue unit, had been doing this job for 19 years. He had pulled people from avalanches. He had found hikers who had been missing for 5 days. He had carried bodies down mountains on stretchers. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what he saw when he crested the ridge that morning. A horse. A large, dark-colored horse standing completely still in the snow. Not running. Not panicked. Just standing there like it was waiting for them. "Tell me you see that," Marcus said into his radio, his voice flat with confusion. "We see it," came the response from base camp. "Stay sharp." It might be wild, but the horse wasn't wild in the way they meant. It wasn't acting scared or aggressive. It was protecting something. Marcus could see that immediately. The horse was standing over a shape in the snow, a human shape, barely visible under the white covering. All Marcus could see was dark hair, sticking out from under a layer of ice and snow. And the horse was not moving, not one muscle, just standing there like a statue made of muscle and stubbornness. There were 4 rescue workers in Marcus's unit that morning. They moved slowly, carefully, the way you move when you are in a place you don't understand. The snow was deeper up here on the ridge than it had been lower down the mountain. It came up to their waists in some spots. The wind had died down overnight, but the temperature was still brutally cold. Marcus could see the numbers on his watch, -14 degrees Fahrenheit. The kind of cold that kills you if you stay in it long enough. The kind of cold that should have killed whoever was lying under that snow hours ago. The horse's sides were heaving. It was breathing in hard, heavy breaths, and Marcus could see the exhaustion in the animal's stance. It had been standing in this cold for hours, possibly since the night before. The muscles in its legs were trembling. "Easy," Marcus called out, using the calm voice he used with frightened people. "Easy there. We're not going to hurt anybody." The horse's ears turned toward him. But the horse did not move. They got closer 50 feet away, then 40 feet away. Marcus could see more now. The shape under the snow was definitely a person. He could see the outline. A thin person, or someone curled up small. The snow around the body was darker, wet from contact with whatever warmth was still left in that human body. The horse was standing directly over the person's chest and face area, protecting the core, the vital organs. The most important parts? Has it been moving? Sarah's colleague, Jennifer, whispered. She was the newest member of their team, only 2 years into rescue work. Her voice was shaking. "How long has it been standing like that?" "No way to know," Marcus said. "Not yet. They needed to move the horse. There was no way around it. They needed to examine the person. They needed to understand if this person was still alive. They needed to get them off this freezing mountain. But the horse was not moving, and nobody wanted to spook it into an action that could hurt the unconscious person beneath it. Marcus pulled out his phone. The signal up here was unpredictable, but he managed to get through to base camp. "We've got a situation," he said. "We've got a human down, approximately 35 years old, possibly severe hypothermia. But we've got a horse protecting the body." I repeat, a horse is standing over the victim and refusing to move. There was a long silence from base camp. Then, "A horse? What horse?" "Unknown, no saddle, no tags that I can see. Just a horse. Wild horse, possibly, but it's not acting wild. It's acting protective." Jennifer was already pulling out her medical kit. "We need to get closer. We need to check vitals." But when the rescue team took another step forward, the horse shifted its weight. It didn't kick. It didn't rear up. But there was a clear message in that shift, a warning. Do not come closer. "I am serious about this." Marcus had a decision to make. He could try to separate the horse from the human. He could try to move it by force, or by using ropes, or by making loud noises to scare it away. He had been trained for many situations, but this wasn't in any of the training manuals. How do you rescue someone when the barrier between you and them is a horse that appears to have appointed itself as a guardian. "Wait," Marcus said. He held up his hand to stop the other rescue workers. "Just wait a minute." He knelt down in the snow, staying far enough away that he wasn't a threat to the horse. He stayed there, unmoving, watching. The horse watched back. For several minutes, neither the man nor the horse moved. It was a standoff, except it wasn't hostile. It felt like understanding passing between two creatures who had different kinds of suffering, but understood suffering nonetheless. Finally, Marcus spoke into his radio. "We're going to move slowly. We're going to let this horse understand that we're trying to help. Jennifer, prepare an emergency warming kit. We might need to warm the victim gradually. This cold exposure is so severe that rapid rewarming could be dangerous." Then, very slowly, Marcus started mooring toward the horse. Not directly toward it, but circling slightly, approaching at an angle, the way someone approaches a frightened animal. He kept his movements smooth and his voice calm. He was not using the rescue voice. He was using the voice he used with his daughter when she was scared. The voice that said, "I am here, and nothing bad is going to happen." The horse watched every movement. Its nostrils flared, catching the scent of this human who was moving closer. Marcus could see the tension in the horse's body, the decision being made moment by moment, trust or protect. Let him come or drive him away. When Marcus was 10 feet away, the horse finally moved. It didn't back away. It shifted to the side, just slightly, just enough to allow Marcus to see the person lying beneath it. It was a woman. Dark hair, pale skin, and she was not moving. Her lips were slightly blue. Her eyes were closed. She looked like a sculpture made of ice, but there was something else. There was something about her face that made Marcus pause. He was looking at features that seemed familiar somehow, though he had no way of knowing why. There was something about the way she lay there, something about the angle of her body, something that made Marcus think of stories his grandfather had told him about the mountain. Stories about debts that came due. Stories about chances to make things right. He reached out slowly and touched the woman's neck, searching for a pulse. There was one. Faint, but there. This woman was alive, and the horse, having finally allowed someone to touch her charge, released a sound, not quite a whimper, but close to it. A sound that held months of worry, years of loneliness, and the terrible weight of watching someone you care about suffer. Sarah Chen was alive, but barely. When the medical team arrived with the stretcher and emergency heating equipment, they explained to Marcus what was happening. The woman's body temperature was 91 degrees. Normal was 98.6. Every degree mattered. Every degree was the difference between life and a very specific kind of death. "She's been exposed for at least 14 hours, Jennifer said, checking the woman's pupils. "Maybe longer. The fact that she survived this is almost impossible." "The horse," Marcus said. "The horse did this." "Horses don't protect humans," one of the paramedics said. His name was David, and he had been doing this work for even longer than Marcus. Horses run. That's what they do. But this horse was not running. As the rescue team carefully prepared the woman for transport down the mountain, the horse moved closer. Not aggressively, not even curiously. The horse just wanted to stay near. The horse wanted to make sure that this rescue team understood that they were handling something precious. "We need to find out where this horse came from," Marcus said into his radio. "It's not wild. Look at it. No scars. Decent weight. Someone has been taking care of this animal." What nobody understood yet was that taking care and being loved were not the same thing. Not in the case of this horse. It took almost an hour to get the woman safely packaged and ready for the helicopter evacuation. The horse stood nearby the entire time, watching. When they lifted the stretcher, the horse moved with them. When they started walking down the mountain, the horse followed. The rescue team let it come. They did not try to stop it. They did not try to separate it from the woman. Something about the way that horse moved told them that it was important. Back at base camp, a ranger named Officer Luis Torres was waiting with the helicopter. He was the one who had reported finding the unusual tracks, that morning-deep hoof prints in the snow, leading up the ridge in a way that made no sense. Wild horses did not travel that way. Wild horses did not choose to walk into storms. When the rescue team came down the mountain, with the horse still following behind the stretcher, Luz's mouth fell open. "That's Dakota," he said. Everyone stopped. The stretcher stopped. The paramedics stopped. Even the horse seemed to stop, as if it had heard its own name and wanted to know who was speaking it. "You know this horse?" Marcus asked. "I might," Luis said slowly. "There's a ranch about 12 miles from here. The Bridger Ranch. They have horses. I did a welfare check out there about 6 months ago. Complaint about animal neglect, but I only saw a few horses. The owner said the rest were in the back pasture, and the back pasture was off limits to visitors." "Off limits?" Jennifer said. "Why would it be off limits?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Luis said. He was already pulling out his phone, searching for something. "Give me a second. The woman. What's her name? Did anyone check her ID?" They had not. The woman had not been carrying a purse or a backpack. She had only the clothes on her body, a light jacket and jeans, completely inadequate for a winter mountain storm. But Jennifer had found a small necklace, silver, with initials etched into a small pendant. SC. Luis typed something into his phone, and he looked up, and his face had changed. SC could be Sarah Chen. "Who is Sarah Chen?" Marcus asked. "I'm not sure," Luis said, "but my father worked on a ranch a long time ago, before I was born. The Bridger Ranch was sold to a new family in the year 2000, but before that it belonged to someone named Chun. My father said the owner had a daughter. He said the daughter was beautiful and smart, and one day the family just moved away. California, I think. My father always wondered what happened to that girl." The helicopter pilot was getting impatient. The window for safe evacuation was closing. The woman on the stretcher needed to be at a hospital in the next 20 minutes, or her chances of survival would drop significantly. But Luis had figured something out, something that made him look at the horse differently. "This horse is 18 years old," Luis said quietly. "I remember because the owner, the ranch manager, he was very proud of her. Show horse. Beautiful animal. But then I heard he moved her to the back pasture. Nobody knew why. Nobody saw her anymore. The horse was standing very still now. It was looking at the stretcher. It was looking at the woman whose initials were SC, and something in its eyes suggested understanding. Not human understanding, but something older. Something animal understanding that knew this woman. Had known her once. Had been waiting for her for a very long time. "We need to go," the helicopter pilot called out. "Now, or we're not going." Marcus made a decision. Load her. Get her to the hospital. We'll figure out the rest of this later. The woman, possibly Sarah Chen, was placed gently into the helicopter. The horse moved as if it wanted to follow, its muscles tensing, but Luis stepped forward and spoke to the horse in a voice that was soft and certain. The horse hesitated. Then it stepped back. It did not fight. It did not try to run after the helicopter as it lifted up into the cold mountain air. Instead, it stood there watching until the helicopter disappeared into the clouds. Back at the emergency room in Bozeman Hospital, 3 hours later, the doctors confirmed what Luis had suspected. The woman's ID had been found in the hospital's lost, and found, apparently, she had dropped it somewhere. Her name was Sarah Chen, 35 years old, originally from Seattle, originally from this area as a child. Her emergency contact was listed as her mother, Margaret Chun, living in California. When the doctors called the mother to tell her that her daughter was in the hospital, possibly suffering from severe hypothermia and in critical condition, Margaret Chun did not ask many questions. She booked the flight. But before she got on that plane, she did something that would eventually explain everything. She opened an old box of photographs. She looked at pictures of her daughter at age 4, at age 5, at age 6. In many of those photographs, in the background, there was a barn. And in several of those photographs, there was a young horse, a very young foal, learning to stand on its own legs with a beautiful dark chestnut coat. Margaret Chun looked at those photographs for a long time. Then she cried, because she suddenly understood something that nobody else had figured out yet. She understood why a horse had stood in a blizzard for 14 hours. She understood why a horse that should have abandoned Sarah to die had chosen instead to save her. Some connections run deeper than memory. Some bonds survive separation and time and years of forgetting. And some horses, broken though they may be, remember the people who matter most. The horse was still standing on the mountain when the sun began to set. It was standing where the rescue team had left it, watching the direction the helicopter had gone. And nobody who saw that horse standing alone in the snow could deny what they were witnessing, Dot. It was not just waiting. It was mourning. It was hoping. It was doing what it had been doing every day for the past 18 years, Dot. It was loving someone who did not remember it. Sarah Chun opened her eyes at 3 in the morning. She did not know where she was. She did not know how much time had passed. She only knew that she was warm, which was impossible, because the last thing she remembered was cold so complete that it had stopped being a feeling and become her entire existence. A nurse was sitting beside her bed. The nurse's name was Carol, and she had been watching Sarah's heart monitor for the last 8 hours, waiting for the moment when consciousness returned. Carl had seen hypothermia cases before. She had seen people wake up confused and scared, but she had never seen someone wake up the way Sarah was waking up. Not confused about where she was, but confused about being alive at all. "What happened?" Sarah whispered. Her voice was rough. Her throat felt like she had swallowed gravel. "You survived," Carol said simply. "That's what happened. You survived something that most people don't survive." It took 3 days for Sarah to understand the full story. The doctors came in and explained about her body temperature. They explained about the rescue team. They explained about the horse. When they mentioned the horse, Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she did not say why. She did not explain anything. She just closed her eyes and cried silently. Her mother arrived on the 2nd day. Margaret Chun walked into the hospital room and saw her daughter lying in the bed, hooked up to machines, pale as a ghost, and she collapsed into a chair beside the bed and wept. Margaret had not cried in years. Margaret had learned a long time ago that crying did not change anything. But now, looking at her daughter alive, she could not stop crying. "I thought I lost you," Margaret said. "When the hospital called, I thought you were gone." "I should be gone," Sarah said. "I don't understand why I'm not." That was when Margaret told her about the horse. She told her about the photographs. She told her about the foal that had been born on the Chun Ranch 18 years ago, before the family moved to California. And when Sarah heard this, something shifted in her face. Something broke open. "Dakota," Sarah whispered. "You remember?" Margaret asked. "No," Sarah said. "I don't remember, but I know that name." "How do I know that name?" What happened next changed everything. Back at the Bridger Ranch, Officer Luis Torres was having a conversation with the owner, a man named Robert Fletcher, who had purchased the property 20 years ago. Luis had come with questions about the horse. He had come with official paperwork and the authority of the law behind him, and he was not going to leave until he got answers. The horse was in good condition, Robert said. He was defensive. His hands were shaking. I fed her. I gave her shelter. There's nothing illegal about moving a horse to the back pasture. But why? Luis asked. He was sitting across from Robert in the ranch office, a small room filled with filing cabinets and photographs of horses that had won competitions. Why move a valuable horse to the back pasture and keep it away from visitors? Why hide it? Because she wasn't worth anything anymore, Robert said. He said it like this was obvious. Like this was simple economics that any reasonable person would understand. She was getting old. Her knees were bad. She couldn't compete anymore. The vet said she probably had another 10, maybe 15 years in her, but she'd never be worth the money it took to keep her. So I moved her to the back pasture. She had food. She had water. She had shelter. That's all a horse needs. Except she left, Louise said. The fence back there had a hole in it. How long had that hole been there? I don't know, Robert said. Months, maybe. I don't go back there much. So a horse that you had hidden away, that nobody was checking on, had access to a broken fence. And on the night of the worst blizzard we've had in 5 years, that horse walked through that hole in the fence and climbed up a mountain trail in the middle of a storm. I didn't make her do that, Robert said. That was her choice. It was her choice, Louise repeated. Yes, that's exactly right. The horse chose to leave her shelter. The horse chose to walk into a blizzard. The horse chose to find a dying human on a mountain. And the horse chose to stand over that human all night long, keeping her warm, keeping her alive. Louise leaned forward. His voice was very quiet. You want to know what I think? I think that horse knew something. I think that horse remembered something. I think that whatever connection you broke by hiding that animal in a back pasture, that connection was strong enough to make that horse come find the person it loved. Even after 18 years, Robert said nothing. He was staring at his hands. I'm going to be asking some questions, Louise continued. I'm going to be looking at your records. I'm going to be checking the horse's health. And if I find anything at all that suggests animal neglect, we're going to have a problem. Do you understand me? Back in the hospital, Sarah was asking questions about the horse. Where was it? Was it okay? Could someone bring it to her? The doctors tried to explain that horses were not allowed in hospitals. The rules were very clear about this. But Sarah became agitated. She became upset in a way that worried the medical staff. Finally, they gave her medication to help her sleep, and she stopped asking questions. But while she slept, something strange happened. Margaret Chun sat beside her daughter's bed and opened her old photo album. She looked at the picture of 3-year-old Sarah standing next to a tiny foal. The foal's mother was in the background. Margaret remembered that day. She remembered her husband being excited about breeding the horse. She remembered him talking about show competitions and prize money, and all the things that had eventually led to them leaving this place. Margaret had not thought about that ranch in 20 years. She had not thought about the horses. She had blocked it all out, the way you block out uncomfortable memories. But now, looking at her daughter sleeping in a hospital bed alive only because of a horse's impossible choice, Margaret understood something. Sometimes the things we abandon do not forget us. Sometimes the creatures we leave behind carry us with them. Sometimes love is so strong that it can survive being broken, buried, hidden away, and separated by mountains and years and time itself. Meanwhile, Dakota was being brought to the veterinary clinic in town. Officer Luis had decided that the horse needed medical attention. The vet's name was Dr. Patricia Morrison, and she had been practicing for 32 years. When she examined Dakota, she found things that made her very angry. This horse is malnourished, Dr. Morrison said. Not starving, but not well fed. The hooves are too long. They haven't been trimmed properly in months. There are scars on the mouth from harsh bits. This horse has been mistreated. Can you prove it? Luis asked. I can document it, Dr. Morrison said. And I can tell you that this horse is also exhausted. Dangerously exhausted. Standing in a blizzard all night, in cold like that, at her age, it's a miracle this animal didn't collapse. Whatever it was that kept her standing, it wasn't physical strength. It was will. Pure will. Louise nodded. He understood. He had been beginning to understand since the moment he saw Dakota standing over Sarah's body on that mountain. This was not just a rescue story. This was a story about a horse that had refused to accept abandonment. This was a story about love that was stronger than neglect, stronger than separation, stronger than 18 years of loneliness. And the most impossible part? The part that nobody could explain? Sarah had been on that mountain, in that storm, dying. And Dakota, hidden away in a back pasture, isolated and forgotten, had somehow known, had somehow felt it, and had chosen to save her. When the doctors finally told Sarah that the horse was safe, that the horse was being cared for, Sarah cried again. But this time she was not crying from grief. This time she was crying from something else. Something that felt very much like recognition. Something that felt like coming home. 5 days after Sarah woke up in the hospital, a police officer came to her room. His name was Officer Torres, and he brought something with him that he set down very carefully on the table beside her bed. It was an old photograph in a broken frame. The photograph showed a young woman and a young horse standing in a sunny pasture. The woman was smiling. The horse was young, beautiful, not yet broken by years of competition and control. "That's you," Officer Torres said. "And that's Dakota. Your mother gave me this photograph. She said it was time you saw it." Sarah picked up the photograph with shaking hands. She stared at it for a very long time. She did not remember the day it was taken. She did not have memories of that horse, that pasture, that young version of herself. But something in her body responded to that image. Something deep inside her, something below memory, something in her bones recognized the truth of it. "I don't remember," Sarah said quietly. "I know," Officer Torres said. "But I think the horse remembers. I think that's why she found you." Over the next 2 days, Officer Torres explained everything to Sarah. He explained about the ranch. He explained about the owner, Robert Fletcher, and the decision he had made to move Dakota to the back pasture because the horse was no longer profitable. He explained about the broken fence. He explained about the blizzard and the impossible chain of events that had led to a horse climbing a mountain in the middle of winter to save a woman she had not seen since they were both very young. "The veterinarian filed a report," Officer Torres said. "We're investigating the ranch for animal neglect. There might be legal action. There might be consequences." "What will happen to Dakota?" Sarah asked. This was the only question that mattered to her. "That depends," Officer Torres said. "Right now, the horse is at the veterinary clinic. She's being treated for malnutrition and exhaustion, but she can't stay there forever. The vet is willing to keep her for a while at no cost, but eventually, someone will have to make a decision about her future." Sarah understood what he was saying without him saying it directly. The horse needed a home. The horse needed someone to take responsibility for her. The horse needed someone to choose her, not for show, not for profit, not for anything except the simple fact of love. "I want her," Sarah said. "When I get out of here, I want Dakota." "Sarah," Officer Torres said carefully, "you just survived hypothermia. You almost died on a mountain. You need to think about what's best for you right now." "I know what's best for me," Sarah said. "I know exactly what's best for me. I want that horse." What Sarah did not tell Officer Torres was what had happened the night before. She did not tell him that she had dreamed about the mountain. She did not tell him that in the dream she was lying in the snow, dying, and a dark horse had come to her. And in that dream, Sarah understood something. She understood that the horse had been waiting for her. She understood that across 18 years and miles and separation, the horse had never stopped knowing her. When Sarah woke from that dream, she had cried. Not from fear, not from sadness, but from the sudden, overwhelming knowledge that her life had been wrong. She had been living in Seattle in a job she hated. She had been in a relationship with a man who did not love her. She had been walking a path that someone else had drawn for her. And she had been doing all of this while a horse waited, alone and abandoned, for the person who had abandoned her. The universe had given Sarah a second chance. It had literally saved her life. And Sarah was not going to waste it. 2 weeks later, Sarah checked herself out of the hospital. The doctors protested. She still needed monitoring. She was still weak. She needed to rest. But Sarah signed the paperwork, and she walked out of that hospital, and she went directly to the veterinary clinic where Dakota was being kept. Dr. Patricia Morrison warned her. The horse has been through a lot. She's not going to be the same animal she was before. Trust takes time. Healing takes time. Sarah understood. She walked into the stall where Dakota was kept, and she stood very still. The horse looked at her. The horse's ears turned toward her. And for a moment, they were just two broken creatures looking at each other across a gap of time and pain and separation. Sarah did not try to touch the horse. She did not try to pet her or force connection. She simply sat down in the straw, about 4 feet away from Dakota, and she stayed there. She stayed for an hour. She came back the next day and did the same thing. She sat in the straw, and she did not demand anything. She simply offered her presence. On the 4th day, Dakota walked over to where Sarah was sitting. The horse did not touch her. The horse just stood nearby. But it was enough. It was everything. While Sarah was learning to be near the horse again, something else was happening back at the Bridger Ranch. Officer Torres and the veterinarian had filed their reports. The County Animal Welfare Board had opened an investigation. And Robert Fletcher, the owner of the ranch, was starting to understand that his decision to hide a horse in a back pasture was going to have very serious consequences. The investigation found more than just Dakota. It found 2 other horses that had also been mistreated. It found inadequate shelter. It found medical records that showed the veterinarian had warned Robert about Dakota's health 2 years earlier, and Robert had ignored those warnings. It found a pattern of negligence that stretched back more than a decade. Robert Fletcher was charged with animal cruelty. It was not a violent crime. Nobody had hit these horses. But the law understood something important. Neglect is a form of violence. Abandonment is a form of cruelty. Deciding that a living creature is not worth the cost of care is a decision with consequences. The month that Robert Fletcher's trial was happening, Sarah was doing something that surprised everyone who knew her. She was buying back her family's old ranch, the original Chen property, the place where she had been born and where Dakota had been born. It was a massive decision. It took almost all of her savings. Her friends in Seattle thought she was making a terrible mistake. "You're throwing away your life," one of them told her. "For a horse? Sarah, that's crazy." But Sarah was not throwing away her life. Sarah was finally, for the first time, building one that made sense. She was building a life where her past and her present were no longer separated. She was building a life where love, the love of a horse that had refused to forget her, was the most important thing. When the paperwork was finalized, when the property was officially hers, Sarah drove Dakota to the ranch in a special horse trailer borrowed from Dr. Morrison. The horse had been nervous during the drive, but when Sarah opened the trailer and Dakota stepped out onto the grass of the meadow where she had been born, something shifted. The horse lifted her head. The horse looked at the mountains. The horse looked at the pasture. And the horse looked at Sarah. Sarah stood very still. She did not move toward the horse. She simply allowed herself to be present. And then Dakota did something that nobody, not the veterinarian, not Officer Torres, not Margaret Chen, would have believed possible. The horse walked over to Sarah and rested her head against Sarah's shoulder. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Sarah to feel the weight of 18 years of waiting. Just long enough for both of them to understand that they were finally home. Sarah did not cry. She simply stood there with her hand on the horse's neck, feeling the warm breath and the steady heartbeat. She was thinking about all the broken things that could be healed. She was thinking about second chances. She was thinking about how the universe sometimes breaks you so completely that you have no choice but to rebuild yourself into something better. And she was thinking about the horse. Always about the horse. The horse that had loved her through abandonment. The horse that had climbed a mountain in a blizzard to save her. The horse that had taught her, without speaking a word, what it meant to be loyal, what it meant to matter, what it meant to be chosen. A year passed, then another, then 5 years. Time moved differently on the ranch than it had in Sarah's old life in Seattle. Time moved at the pace of seasons. Time moved at the pace of a horse healing. Time moved at the pace of broken things learning to trust again. The Chun Ranch, once abandoned and empty, came alive. Sarah had used the money from selling her condo in Seattle to buy supplies and repair the barn. She had hired a contractor to fix the fencing. She had planted new grass in the pasture. And slowly, carefully, she had filled the ranch with other horses. Not show horses. Not horses meant to make money or win competitions or prove anything to anyone. These were rescue horses. These were horses that had been abandoned, neglected, abused, or forgotten. These were horses that the world had decided were not worth the cost of keeping. Sarah decided differently, and named them careful names. She learned their stories. She hired a trainer named Michael, who understood that broken horses needed patience, not control. Michael taught Sarah how to work with a traumatized animal. He taught her that sometimes trust takes years. He taught her that love is not something you demand. Love is something you offer, over and over, until the animal decides that maybe humans can be safe after all. Dakota was the first horse Sarah brought to the ranch. Dakota became the elder. Dakota became the teacher. Sarah did not make Dakota do anything. Dakota could graze in the meadow, or stand in the barn, or walk the trails. Dakota could choose her own life. And it was this freedom, this simple choice, that allowed Dakota to finally begin to heal. The first time Dakota ran in the open pasture truly ran, not out of fear, but out of joy, Sarah stood at the fence and watched. The horse was 17 years old. The horse had spent 15 years in isolation. The horse had been broken by years of harsh training. And yet here she was, running through a meadow, her mane flying, her legs strong, remembering what it felt like to simply exist without pain. Sarah cried watching that horse run. She cried from relief. She cried from gratitude. She cried from the understanding that some things can be repaired, some damage can be healed, some broken creatures can learn to fly again. Word of the ranch spread slowly at first. A local news station did a small story about the woman who had survived hypothermia and was now running a horse sanctuary. The story did not go viral. It did not become famous, but it reached people. It reached people who cared about horses. It reached people who knew about rescue and abandonment and second chances. Margaret Chun, Sarah's mother, moved from California to help run the ranch. She had retired from her job. She had sold her house. She had decided that the last chapter of her life should be spent doing something that mattered, working with her daughter, caring for horses, making up for the years that she and Sarah had spent separated from this place. "I never understood why your father wanted to leave," Margaret told Sarah one afternoon as they were grooming one of the newer rescue horses. "I just went along with it. I thought it was the right thing to do, but I think I was wrong. I think this place was always supposed to be your home." Officer Luis Torres became a regular visitor at the ranch. He would bring his children. He would help with repairs. He would sit on the fence and watch the horses graze. And he would remember stories his father had told him about working here, all those years ago, before everything changed. "My father always said this place had magic in it," Luis told Sarah one day. "I didn't understand what he meant, but I think I do now." The veterinarian, Dr. Patricia Morrison, became a close friend. She came to the ranch once a month to check on all the horses. She watched Dakota heal. She watched the other horses begin to trust again. And she began to understand that healing was not just a medical process. Healing was something that happened in safe spaces, in the presence of people who loved you, in the simplicity of a horse being allowed to be a horse. 5 years after Sarah brought Dakota home, something happened that nobody expected. A documentary filmmaker named James Chang, no relation to Sarah, though the name made them both laugh, came to the ranch to do a story. He had heard about the woman and the horse. He had heard about the blizzard rescue. He had heard about the impossible connection, and he wanted to tell the story. James spent 3 months at the ranch. He filmed Sarah working with the horses. He filmed Dakota grazing in the meadow. He filmed the moment when a new rescue horse, a young mare that had been severely abused, finally allowed Sarah to touch her head without flinching. He filmed the sunsets over the mountains. He filmed the simple, quiet moments that made up a life dedicated to healing. When the documentary came out, it was shown at film festivals. It won awards. It was picked up by streaming services. And suddenly, the story of Sarah and Dakota was being seen by millions of people around the world. People came to the ranch. People came from other states. People came from other countries. They came to see the horse that had saved a life. They came to understand what love looked like when it was brave enough to survive abandonment. They came because they needed to believe that broken things could be healed. Sarah never became comfortable with the attention. She was a private person. She had always been a private person. But she understood something important. Her story was not really hers anymore. Her story belonged to everyone who had ever loved something that the world had decided was not worth loving. Her story belonged to everyone who had ever been broken and wondered if healing was possible. On the 10th anniversary of the blizzard, the night when Dakota had stood over Sarah and refused to leave her to die, there was a celebration at the ranch. Margaret came. Officer Torres came with his family. Dr. Morrison came. Michael the trainer came. Hundreds of other people came. They came to remember a miracle. They came to celebrate survival. They came to witness love. Sarah took everyone to the meadow where Dakota spent most of her time now. The horse was 28 years old. She was still strong, still beautiful, but she moved more slowly. Her coat had more gray in it. Her eyes were tired, but her eyes were also peaceful. Her eyes were the eyes of a creature that had learned, finally, what it meant to be safe. As the sun set over the mountains, Sarah stood beside Dakota. She placed her hand on the horse's neck, and she thought about the night on the mountain. She thought about dying. She thought about being saved. She thought about all the ways that one impossible moment could change everything. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the horse. Not because Dakota could understand the words, but because sometimes you need to say things out loud. Sometimes you need to acknowledge the magnitude of what someone or something has given you. Dakota turned her head and looked at Sarah. The horse closed her eyes. It was a gesture of trust so complete, so simple, that everyone watching understood exactly what it meant. It meant, "I trust you." It meant, "I chose you." It meant, "We are home." When Dakota died 2 years later peacefully, in her sleep, in the meadow where she had learned to run again, Sarah buried her in the place where they had first reunited. She planted trees around the grave. Oak trees and aspen trees, the kind of trees that live for centuries. The kind of trees that grow deep roots and reach high branches. Sarah carved words into a stone that she placed above the grave. The words were simple. The words were true. They read, "She saved me when I was lost. She taught me what it means to come home." Years later, people would come to visit that grave. People would sit under those trees and think about their own broken things. They would think about their own losses. They would think about whether healing was possible. And they would look at the stone, and they would understand that sometimes the greatest love is the love that refuses to let go. Sometimes the most powerful rescue is the one you offer to someone who has already abandoned you. Sarah lived on that ranch for the rest of her life. She rescued hundreds of horses. She trained young people to work with traumatized animals. She wrote a book about her experience. She gave talks about healing and second chances and the possibility of coming home. But nothing was ever as powerful as that first moment when she realized that a horse had climbed a mountain in a blizzard to save her. Nothing was ever as meaningful as learning that love could survive 18 years of separation. Nothing was ever as healing as the day when Dakota rested her head on Sarah's shoulder and offered forgiveness to a woman who had unknowingly abandoned her so long ago. The story of Sarah and Dakota became a story that people told their children. It became a story that people shared when they needed to believe in miracles. It became a story that proved something that people had always suspected but never quite believed, that love is stronger than abandonment, that loyalty can survive anything, that sometimes the most broken creatures are capable of the greatest love. And on quiet nights, when Sarah would stand in the meadow and look at the mountains where everything had changed, she would whisper thank you to the horse that had refused to move. Thank you for the rescue. Thank you for the second chance. Thank you for teaching her what it meant to finally come home.